The Walk Home. Chapter 1. The Harbor After the Storm. The storm had passed, but the room still smelled of rain. The shutters rattled when the wind changed, and she stood by the open window with a cigarette that kept going out. He watched her from the chair, his shirt damp, his hands loose on his knees. Neither spoke. It was the kind of silence that came after everything had already been said. "Light's gone," she said finally. "It'll come back," he answered. She looked at him, her face pale in the faint light from the street. "You always think things come back." He didn't answer. The chair creaked when he leaned forward to pick up his pack of cigarettes. His hands were steady, too steady. "You want one?" he asked. "No. You'll just take mine later." She smiled faintly. Maybe. They had been here 3 days, and it had rained every one of them. The sea below the town was a dull green, heaving under gray clouds that never broke. The storm had come in the night before, hard and sudden, hammering the shutters, flooding the narrow street. Now the gutters ran like small rivers, and the square smelled of wet fish and salt. She turned from the window. "We can't stay here. We can stay anywhere. Not like this." He looked at her then, the way he always did when he was about to say something true and couldn't. The silence filled the space between them like water. "You could go back," he said. "Back to what?" "To the things that make sense." She laughed softly. "You think sense is what I came here for?" The wind shifted, pushing the rain smell into the room again. He stood and went to the table, poured the last of the wine into 2 glasses. The cork from the night before lay near the edge, swollen from the damp. "You should eat something," he said. "I'm not hungry. You said that yesterday. And the day before. You'll faint one of these days. Then you'll catch me." He didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth moved slightly. He drank, and she came over and took his glass from his hand. "I'll catch you," he said. "You always do. That's the trouble." Outside, the bells from the church tower began to ring. The sound was slow and deep, rolling across the wet town. The wind carried it through the window, and for a moment they both stood still, listening. By noon the sky cleared. The air was soft, washed clean, and the town woke to the sound of shutters opening and chairs being dragged onto balconies. He went down to the harbor alone. The cobblestones were slick, and the smell of diesel and salt mixed with the sweetness of wet wood. The fishermen were out mending nets, their hands brown and rough. Gulls circled low over the boats, crying in short, hungry bursts. He walked past the old pier where the tide slapped against the posts and stopped at the end. The water moved in slow folds, green and heavy. He could see the line of hills beyond the bay, their tops still shrouded in mist. He lit another cigarette and watched the smoke drift. The town always looked different after a storm, as if something had been stripped away, all the color, all the noise, leaving only the bones of it. He stayed there a long while before he saw her coming down the steps. She wore the red scarf again, the one he'd bought her in Naples 2 years ago when they had fought by the sea and made up in a small hotel room above a cafe. The scarf had been torn once, and she had mended it with tiny, uneven stitches. He had never liked those stitches. She stopped a few yards from him. "You left early. You were sleeping." "I wasn't." She came closer, her shoes clicking softly on the stone. The wind caught her hair and lifted it across her face. She didn't brush it away. "You said we wouldn't come here again," she said. "I didn't plan to." "Then why?" He shrugged. "I wanted to see if it still hurt." She looked at him for a long moment, and then turned toward the water. "And it does." The gulls dove at the boats, their cries sharp against the wind. She leaned on the railing, her scarf trembling against her throat. "You shouldn't have come," she said quietly. "Maybe not. You could still leave." "I could." He moved closer, his shoulder almost touching hers. "You could come with me." She shook her head. "You always say that, and you never mean it." "I mean it now." "No, you mean it because it's raining and you're lonely. You mean it because the sea looks like something you can still control." He turned his face toward hers. "You think I'm trying to control this? I think you're trying to make it make sense. And it won't." A wave struck the pier and broke, spraying cold water over their shoes. She laughed, short and bright, like she used to. "You see," she said, "even the sea won't stay calm for you." He reached out then, without thinking, and touched her arm. She didn't pull away. Her skin was cold under his hand. "I still love you," he said. "I know. It doesn't change anything, does it?" "No." They stood there, the sound of water between them. A boat horn sounded from far out in the bay. The sky was clearing again, pale blue breaking through the gray. "You remember the night we left Naples?" he said. "I remember everything. I thought we were finished then." "So did I. And yet here we are," she said softly. He laughed once, dryly. "It's a hell of a thing." She turned to face him. Her eyes were steady, but there was a shine in them that could have been from the wind. "You'll leave again. You always do. Maybe I won't this time." "You will. Because if you stayed, it would kill you. And if I went with you, it would kill me." She took a step back, her scarf fluttering. "That's what love is for people like us. Something that only works when it's ending." He looked down, then back at her. "And when it's over?" "It never is." Later that evening, the rain came again, soft at first, then steady. The light in the room was dim, the kind that made everything look like memory. He sat at the table, listening to the water on the roof. The door opened, and she came in, her hair wet, her eyes unreadable. She didn't speak. She went to the chair by the window and sat, looking out at the dark street. He poured her a drink without asking. She took it and held it in both hands. "You saw me at the harbor," she said. "I did. You shouldn't have followed." "I didn't. You found me." She smiled faintly. "That's worse." They drank in silence. The lamp flickered once, then steadied. The sound of rain filled the room, soft and endless. "Do you think we'll ever stop doing this?" she asked. "What? Finding each other? Breaking each other?" "No." She nodded as if she already knew. Then she set down the glass, stood, and went to him. When she kissed him, it was not gentle. It was like a wave that knew where it was going. At dawn, she was gone. The rain had stopped again, and the air smelled of salt and smoke. Her scarf lay on the chair, the red bright against the gray of the morning. He picked it up, felt the rough seam where she had mended it. Outside, the bells began to ring, slow, deliberate, as if announcing something the town already knew. He looked toward the harbor. The sea was calm now, the boat still, the wind quiet. He thought of following her, of finding her again in whatever town she fled to this time. But instead he stood there, holding the scarf, until the light filled the room. And when it did, he whispered her name once, low and final, and set the scarf back on the chair. Chapter 2. The Letter. The scarf stayed on the chair for 3 days. He didn't move it, didn't fold it or hide it. It lay there like a small, defiant wound, bright and quiet, holding its own place in the gray of the room. The rain came again, but softer now, as if the sky had grown tired. He wrote nothing. He drank coffee from a chipped mug and watched the harbor through the window. The boats came and went. Men shouted to each other in the mornings, and at night the sea breathed against the pier like something alive but half asleep. He thought about her sometimes more than that. He thought about where she might have gone, north maybe, to Lyon, or farther still, to the coast where the air was drier and the light harsher. She had always liked hard light, said it made things honest. On the 4th morning, the letter came. It was slipped under the door, damp at the edges, the ink slightly bled from rain. There was no name on the front, just the room number written in her small, deliberate hand. He looked at it a long time before picking it up. The paper was thin. He could see the shadows of her writing through it. He set it on the table and made himself another cup of coffee before opening it. When he finally did, he read it twice. "My dear, I left because staying would have been another kind of lie. You know that as well as I do. The storm wasn't the reason. It never is. It's what comes after, the calm, the waiting, the hours that make you start to believe again. I can't live in that part. You think love is something that can be fixed if you hold it long enough. But it isn't. It's like the sea after a storm, clear for a while, then restless again. I'll be in Alls for a week, maybe longer. There's a woman here who paints. She says the light here can cure you. I don't believe her, but I like the way she says it. Don't come after me this time. Please. You always find me. Try not to. E. He folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. Then he sat there a long time, listening to the wind move through the street. When the bells rang from the church, he got up and went down to the harbor. The air was cold and clean. A group of boys were pushing a small boat into the shallows. The tide was coming in, soft and sure. Going out again? One of the fishermen asked. He nodded. Storm will turn, the man said. Sea's not done yet. It never is. He went back to the inn and packed what little he had. The scarf he left on the chair. The train to Alls was almost empty. He sat by the window, watching the land shift, the green hills giving way to the pale dust of the south. The rivers were swollen from rain. Every so often, he saw a flash of sunlight on the water, quick as breath. At a small station near Avignon, a girl boarded. She sat across from him and smiled politely. She had a book in her hands, old and frayed. He tried not to stare. "Is it raining up there?" she asked. "Not anymore." "Good," she said. "I hate the sound of rain on glass." "Why?" "It makes me think of waiting." He nodded and looked back out the window. When the train reached Alls, the air was bright and dry, the light sharp as she had written. He stepped down onto the platform and saw the hills to the east, flat and gold under the sun. He found a room above a cafe near the square. The walls were white, the bed narrow, the air heavy with the smell of oil and bread. He left his bag there and went out walking. The streets were quiet except for the cicadas. The town looked old in a different way, not worn down, but sunburned, like a face that had seen too much brightness. He passed a gallery near the river. In the window hung a painting of a woman in a red scarf, standing by the sea. The brushstrokes were rough, the colors wild. For a moment he thought it might be her. Then he looked closer and saw it wasn't. He went in anyway. Inside, the air was cool. The woman who ran the place was tall, with gray hair pulled tight at the back. She looked up from a ledger and smiled. "You're looking for something?" she asked. "I don't know yet. Most people don't." He walked the length of the room, past landscapes and portraits, all marked by the same restless light. The woman watched him with the quiet ease of someone who had seen many men like him, the ones chasing ghosts through towns they didn't know. When he turned to leave, she said, "You've come for her, haven't you?" He stopped. "She told me someone would." "Where is she?" The woman studied him for a moment, then nodded toward the far window. "There's a vineyard beyond the river. She goes there at dusk to paint. If you go, don't speak right away. Let her see you first." He thanked her and left. The road to the river was long and straight. The sun hung low, burning gold through the dust. The vineyard spread on both sides, the vines twisted and dark against the light. He saw her before she saw him. She was standing near a low wall, a canvas on the ground beside her, her hair loose and caught in the wind. The scarf was gone. She wore a white dress, the same color as the clouds. He stopped a few yards away. "You didn't listen," she said without turning. "No. I asked you not to come." "I know. Then why did you?" "Because I read your letter." She turned then, her face calm, unreadable. The light hit her eyes and made them look almost gold. "It wasn't meant to be an invitation." "I know that too." They stood there, the air humming with insects and heat. She looked down at her canvas, at the faint image of the hills, the rough line of the river. "It's not finished," she said. "It never is." She smiled faintly. "You still talk like everything means something." "Maybe it does. Or maybe it just sounds better that way." He took a step closer. "You wrote you didn't believe in the light curing anything." "I don't." "Then why are you here?" "Because I wanted to see if it could." He nodded. The wind lifted a strand of her hair across her face, and he reached to brush it back. She didn't move away, but she didn't look at him either. "What happens now?" she asked. "We don't decide that." "Then who does?" "The part of us that still believes it matters." She looked up then, and for the first time since he'd found her, her expression softened. "You'll always come, won't you?" "Yes." "And I'll always leave." "Yes." The sun dropped lower, painting the vines in orange light. The river caught the color and carried it downstream. "Then maybe," she said quietly, "this is all the cure there is, finding each other until we can't anymore." He wanted to speak, but there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said in every place they'd broken apart. So he only nodded. She picked up her brush again. The light shifted, gold fading to red. He watched her paint until the shadows grew long and the air turned cool. Then he walked back toward the town, her figure growing smaller in the distance. When he reached the bridge, he stopped and looked once more toward the vineyard. The wind carried the faint scent of paint and wine. He thought about the letter, the handwriting, the way the ink had bled where the rain touched it. And he knew, somewhere in the folds of that damp paper, she had already told him everything. Chapter 3, The Visit. She hadn't meant to go back. It started with a train she didn't plan to take, a morning that felt too still, and a letter she never sent. The letter sat folded inside her sketchbook, thin, half-finished, her handwriting small and tight. She had written his name at the top, stopped, then drawn a line through it. There was nothing left to tell him that he didn't already know. He had always read her silences better than her words. Alls had grown too bright. The sun pressed against the windows until the air inside the small room went heavy and slow. The woman who painted with her had gone north to Paris for an exhibition. Alone, she found herself tracing old streets and buying fruit she never ate. At night, she listened to the wind. Sometimes it carried the sound of trains, faint, hollow, like memory echoing from another town. On the fifth evening, she packed her things. The scarf she left behind on purpose. She took the early train, the one that ran along the coast. The sea outside the window was calm, the color of tin. There were fishermen in the distance, their nets dark against the pale water. She thought of him then, the way he looked when the light caught his eyes, steady and tired, as if the world had made its final offer and he had taken it. She arrived before noon. The town was smaller than she remembered. The wind smelled of salt and wood smoke. The same cat slept near the church steps, its fur the color of dust. She crossed the square and saw the inn. Same cracked shutters, same slanted sign. Inside, the keeper looked up from his ledger. "You again," he said. "Yes. He's still here, you know." She nodded. "He doesn't talk much." "He never did." The man smiled faintly. "Third floor. Same room." She paused outside the door for a long moment, her hand resting on the brass knob. The corridor smelled of wine and old linen. Somewhere below, a radio played a sad song, French. Slow, full of longing. When she knocked, there was no answer. She turned the handle and went in. The room was quiet. The window stood open, and the wind moved the curtain like breath. On the table lay a small pile of letters bound with twine, and beside them, a book she'd given him once, A Farewell to Arms. She ran her fingers across the spine, then looked at the chair by the window. The red scarf still hung there, the mended edge rough against the fabric. She smiled a little. He hadn't thrown it away. She turned when she heard the door behind her. He stood there, the light from the hallway cutting a narrow line across his face. "You came back," he said. "I didn't plan to. You never do." He looked thinner, though maybe it was the light. His shirt was open at the throat, and his hands looked rougher than she remembered. "Still raining?" she asked. "On and off. It always rains here." "Not always." He came closer, stopped a few feet away. "Why now?" "I don't know," she said. "Maybe I missed the sound of the sea." "You could have gone anywhere for that." "Yes, but it wouldn't have sounded the same." They looked at each other. It felt like standing at the edge of something too familiar to name. "I thought you'd stay in Alls," he said. "I tried. And I painted. I walked. I waited. None of it helped." "You were right about the light, though." "Yes," she said. "It's beautiful. But beauty doesn't keep you company." He nodded, and for a moment neither spoke. The sound of the radio downstairs faded. "You want a drink?" he asked. "Always." He poured 2 glasses of wine. She took hers and sat on the bed. The sheets smelled of rain and smoke. He stayed by the window, leaning against the frame. "You read my letter?" she asked. "Yes. And still you came." "I don't do well with instructions." "You never did." She smiled faintly, then drank. The wine was warm, old. "Did you think about me?" she asked. "Every day." "Then why didn't you write?" "What would I have said?" "Something untrue." "You're good at that." He laughed quietly. "Maybe, but you'd have seen through it." "I would have." The wind shifted, bringing the smell of the harbor through the open window, salt, diesel, rain. "I saw your paintings," he said. "Where?" "The gallery near the river. The woman told me." "She talks too much." "She said you go there at dusk." "I did." "Why dusk?" "Because it's the only time the light doesn't lie." He looked at her then, really looked. "You still believe in that?" "No, but it helps to pretend." He crossed the room slowly, stopped before her. "Why are we still doing this?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do. Because it's the only thing that feels real." He sat beside her. The bed dipped slightly under their weight. They didn't touch, not at first. The silence between them filled again, but this time it felt softer, not an ending, but a pause. "You could stay," he said. "I could." "You won't." "No." She set down her glass, then leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't like before. It was slower, sadder, but sure. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. "You'll hate me again tomorrow." "I know. And you'll follow me the day after." "Yes." They both smiled, small, tired smiles that came from knowing too much. Outside, the bells began to ring for evening. The sky was violet, heavy with new rain. She stood, went to the window, and looked out at the harbor. The water moved in long silver lines, the boats rocking gently. "I'll leave in the morning," she said. He nodded. "I won't stop you." "I know." She turned to him, her face calm, the last of the light touching her cheek. "But you'll come, won't you?" "Yes," he said. "I always do." That night, she couldn't sleep. The rain started again, soft against the glass. She lay beside him, awake, listening to his breathing, steady, unguarded, human. She thought of Alls, of the river, of the way the light had struck the fields in gold. She reached for his hand under the sheets. He stirred, but didn't wake. In the half-dark, she whispered something, a name, or maybe a promise. And though he didn't hear, he turned toward her in his sleep, as if he had. Chapter 4: The Walk Home. The morning broke in a thin gray wash of light. She woke before the bells, before the gulls, before the town began to stir. The air was cool, the kind that slips under doors and brushes against your ankles. He was still asleep beside her, his face turned toward the window, the breath slow and deep. She watched him for a long time. It was strange, she thought, how even peace could ache. On the table, her dress hung over the back of a chair, half folded. The scarf, the red one she had left weeks ago, was there too, still bright in the dim room. She ran her fingers across it. The seam she had mended was rough beneath her thumb. She thought of all the places it had been with them: Naples, Lisbon, Marseilles, always folded, always waiting. It was more constant than either of them. She dressed quietly. The floorboards creaked once and she paused, but he didn't wake. When she was done, she sat on the edge of the bed and watched the slow rise and fall of his chest. "I'll walk you home," he had said the night before. She hadn't answered. They both knew what home meant. Now, she took a small sheet of paper from her bag and wrote a few lines. Not enough to explain, just enough to make leaving clean. "Don't follow this time. Let the tide take what it will. You'll understand later." She folded it once, left it on the pillow beside him. Then she took the scarf and went. The streets were empty. The sea lay quiet under a pale sky, the surface smooth as glass. She walked down past the church, through the square where the cafe chairs were still stacked and wet from the night's rain. The wind carried the smell of salt and morning bread. Somewhere, a boy shouted in the distance, sharp, bright, alive. She followed the road that led out of town, toward the low cliffs where the land opened to the sea. The stones were slick, and her shoes picked up the damp. Each step felt lighter than the one before. She thought of the years, the running, the returning, the endless circle they had made of each other. It wasn't hate that brought her back, and it wasn't love that made her go. It was the same thing that kept the tide moving, the thing that asks for no reason. At the top of the hill, she stopped. The wind came hard across the grass, pulling at her hair, her skirt, the scarf in her hand. She tied it loosely around her neck. Below, the sea shone like a sheet of silver. Boats moved like slow thoughts toward the horizon. She closed her eyes. For a moment, she imagined what it would be like to stay, to go back to the room, to the man still sleeping, to the life that might have been if she'd wanted it badly enough. But when she opened her eyes, the vision broke. The world was wide again, and that was enough. At mid-morning, she reached the next town. The market was open, the noise of voices rising and falling with the smell of oranges and fish. She stopped by a stall and bought a small loaf of bread. The woman selling it smiled at her, said something she didn't catch, and handed her the change with both hands. She ate as she walked. The bread was still warm, the crust rough against her teeth. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel washed by memory. A narrow road led down to the beach. Children were playing near the water, their laughter cutting clean through the sound of the waves. She sat on a rock and watched them. A small girl ran past and stopped, looking at her scarf. "It's red like the sun," the girl said. "It is," she said. "Maybe that's why I wear it." The child nodded, satisfied, and ran off again. She smiled, and for a moment she felt something ease inside her. By afternoon, the light had grown sharp and golden. She turned inland, toward the hills, where a thin path wound through the olive trees. The air was still, filled with the hum of insects and the smell of dust. Every few steps, she looked back and saw the sea growing smaller behind her. She thought about him again, the way he stood by the window, the way his voice went quiet when he was afraid of meaning too much. She wondered if he had found the note yet. She hoped he had. It wasn't that she wanted him to forget. She only wanted him to stop carrying the weight of her return. The sun was low when she reached the top of the ridge. From there, she could see the valley, green and wide, and a small house with a tiled roof near the edge of a vineyard. Smoke rose from the chimney, thin, gray, almost shy. She walked toward it slowly. Her legs were tired, and the dust clung to her shoes. An old man was sitting outside, mending a basket. He looked up when she came near. "Long walk," he said. "Yes." "You from the coast?" "Yes." "Storm there last night?" "A small one." He nodded. "Always is. Come in. The kettle's hot." She followed him inside. The house smelled of wood and thyme. He poured tea into 2 chipped cups and set one in front of her. "Where you headed?" he asked. "I'm not sure yet." He smiled. "Best kind of journey." They drank in silence. The tea was bitter, but warm. When she stood to leave, he said, "Road's quiet after sundown. You can stay here if you like." She looked at the empty bed in the corner, then out the window at the fading light. "Thank you," she said. "I think I will." That night, she lay awake listening to the sound of wind in the trees. It was gentler here, not like the sea wind that carried salt and memory. She thought of him again, but without the old ache. She pictured him finding the note, reading it, maybe even smiling a little. The small, quiet kind of smile he made when he understood something he didn't want to admit. She wondered if he would come again, and knew he might. But this time, she thought, she would not wait for him by the harbor. The road had turned, and she would follow it until it ended, or until it began again. When dawn came, she stepped outside. The sky was clear, washed clean of everything that had been. She started walking. The hills ahead were lit by new light, soft and wide, and for the first time she didn't look back. Chapter 5. The Book of Echoes. He found her letter 3 days after she left. It had slipped down between the sheets, folded small, like it wanted to stay hidden. He read it standing by the bed, the morning light coming in sharp from the window. The words were few, but they struck like stones. "Don't follow this time. Let the tide take what it will. You'll understand later." He read it again and again until the paper softened under his thumb. Then he set it on the table beside the lamp and walked outside. The sea was calm that morning, clear and blue, like nothing had happened. But he knew better. Things always looked peaceful after they broke. He went down to the shore and watched the gulls circle over the water. He thought of her walking along the cliffs, the scarf tied around her neck, her steps light, her eyes already somewhere else. He didn't curse her. He couldn't. He only whispered her name once, not to call her back, but to hear how it sounded in the open air. Years passed in their quiet, uneven way. He stayed in that coastal town, though the inn changed hands twice and the cafe by the harbor shut down. He taught for a while, literature mostly, and spent long hours talking about writers who never learned how to leave what they loved. The students listened politely, but they were young. They hadn't yet reached the age when the past starts to speak louder than the present. Sometimes, walking home in the evenings, he saw a flash of red in the crowd, and his chest would tighten before reason caught up. It was never her. It was never supposed to be. He told himself that understanding would come, as her letter promised. But understanding, like tide water, was slow. It came and went without warning, carving the same shoreline deeper each time. She kept moving for a long while. First north, then inland, where the sea was only a rumor. She found work in a small library, quiet, air thick with the scent of dust and paper. She liked the stillness there, the hum of pages turning, the way light fell in stripes through the blinds. Some afternoons she would sit by the window and write, short notes, reflections, fragments. Not stories exactly, but echoes of things she couldn't quite say aloud. She didn't send them to him. That wasn't the point. She only wrote so that the silence would have shape. One spring, years later, she walked into a small bookshop in the city. The kind with uneven floors and a cat sleeping in the front window. She was looking for a travel guide, but on the counter sat a thin book she hadn't seen before. The Book of Echoes, the title said. By M. Harland. She froze. The name wasn't his, but the first line of the blurb was enough. These are stories of return, of the things we leave behind and the things that follow. She opened it. The dedication read, "For the one who walked home when I couldn't." Her throat tightened. She turned the pages slowly, afraid and certain all at once. The stories were short, some only a page long. But they carried his rhythm, his restraint, his way of saying everything just by leaving something unsaid. In one, a man waits by the sea for a woman who never returns. In another, a woman writes letters to a man she'll never send. And at the end, a single paragraph, no more than a breath. Some loves aren't meant to be finished. They are meant to echo. You hear them in every silence that follows. She closed the book and held it to her chest. For the first time in years, she let herself cry. That night, back in her small apartment, she lit a candle and read the book again, slowly this time, aloud. The words filled the room, low and soft, like waves on the shore. She didn't need to write him anymore. They had already spoken, not through letters or years, but through what they had left behind in each other. He never knew she found it. But sometimes, walking through the market or down to the harbor, he would pause and feel something shift in the air, faint, like a change in pressure before rain. He would smile then, quietly, without reason. He'd learned not to chase the echo anymore. It wasn't meant to be caught. He only had to listen. In time, both their names faded from the talk of the town. The sea kept moving, the boats kept coming and going. But somewhere, on some shelf, their story waited, not as a warning, not as a tragedy, but as proof that some loves do not end, they only drift. And when the wind came off the water at night, it carried a sound that might have been a wave, or a whisper, or a name spoken softly by someone who never truly left. Epilogue, audiobook, closing narration. Soft tide in the background. A single voice, calm, reflective. In the end, there was no storm, no farewell. Only the sound of the sea learning to be quiet again. They had loved as the sea loves the shore, leaving, returning, reshaping the same line until it no longer knew its beginning. What they built was not meant to last in time, but to live in memory, where touch becomes echo, and silence holds what words could not. Some stories end in reunion, others in distance, but there's found peace in the space between. Because even when love drifts beyond reach, its tide still moves within us. Pause. Sound of a distant gull, a soft wave breaking. And if you listen closely, you can still hear them there. Two voices in the surf. Not calling, just remembering.